You have to learn yourself. You have to become a student of yourself. You have to know what's going to work for you and what's not. I healed and grew over years. Now I am much more equipped to participate in different types of roles. So as a trauma recovery coach, for instance, I can sit and talk to someone for an hour and their emotions don't bother me.
Okay. Hi, Jamie, and welcome to Peace Unplugged. Very nice to meet you again. So you're a psychologist, Jamie. Tell me a bit about how you got into that.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you the time to be here. Happy to be here with you. Um, yeah, so I started studying psychology really to kind of figure out my own problems, and there's a saying that one of my professors had that anybody in psychology goes into it to try to figure themselves out. So that was definitely true for me. And the more I got into it, the more I just was just enthralled and it just became my passion in learning and understanding. And even today, a few decades down the road, I'm still learning so much about psychology and philosophy and the human condition. So it's just very fascinating to me. And I got to a point to where I was ready to share that with others and try to help others with issues, especially surrounding mental illness. But not just that, that kind of grew as well. Ended up working in the nonprofit field for many years with domestic violence survivors, sexual assault survivors. And so it's, for me, it's just been a lifelong pursuit of a passion for myself and then to be able to share that and help others in those areas as well.
And how long did you study for?
Well, my bachelor's degree was 4 years, and then my master's was 2.5 years.
Crikey, that's a big chunk of your life, isn't it?
Yeah, but I love it. I enjoy it. And between those times, I didn't go back to back. So after my bachelor's degree was when I worked in the nonprofit field. So I got many years of practical experience working with domestic violence and sexual assault survivors and programs, and also worked for a while with hospitalized children and their families, and a lot of program development and program management in those areas. So I enjoyed really taking what I had learned, not just from education, but from personal experience and applying that to these helping professions that I knew would reach out and help people in the area that they most needed.
Okay, so you've been working with families as well as children as well through that time.
Yeah, and some of that kind of goes back to my first attempt at professionally helping people, which was thwarted, but for a good reason, and ended up actually working out for the best professionally and personally. When I was finishing up my bachelor's degree, my dream was to go into just one-on-one therapy. And I wanted to work with teenage boys that were in the system, as we say. Maybe they're in foster care, maybe their parents are in prison, maybe they're facing jail time themselves as juveniles. And so I I got an internship with a local boys home, and that was a 3 month ordeal. And within 3 months, I was done. I knew, nope, not for me. Can't do it. I just couldn't do it. I would go home almost every night and just cry. It was so emotionally heavy. But a part of that was because I was not healed enough at that time to be able to separate my emotions and theirs. And I'm just empathetic anyways. So I kind of absorb other people's emotions. And so it was obviously not the right role for me at that time. But like I said, it kind of worked out because I ended up going into the program development and program management side. So, for instance, with the Children's Hospital, the first one I worked with, I was in charge of creating a routine volunteer recruitment, training, and management program. So I could work with people and teach them how to interact with the children that were in the hospital, and I could come in and I could speak to their families. So I had the background and understanding of what they were dealing with emotionally, but yet I wasn't sitting there for hours and hours and hours just absorbing their emotions. So it really did turn out for the best to actually not go the first direction that I wanted to.
Jamie, I absolutely agree with you with your experience. Pretty much been similar to myself. I found when I first started working actually in the substance misuse field, the first few weeks was very, very difficult, and I couldn't understand why my emotions were all over the place. And I realised that I actually needed some to go into some proper therapy for myself, to begin to understand. And it's an ongoing thing, isn't it? And it is extremely draining mentally, which then I think affects us physically as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely a anytime that you're healing from trauma or mental illness, it's going to be a long-term pursuit. And I think that's some a place that maybe our perception is not accurate in terms of just general knowledge, whether it's from, TV, movies, or what we just see and hear people talk about. But I think there can be this misconception that, okay, I'm going to go to therapy for a few weeks and I'm going to talk about whatever happened or whatever I'm feeling, and that's going to get it out and I'm going to be good from there. And that's certainly not the case. That's a good part of the process, but it's by no means the entire puzzle. And I always like to look at it that way, as in putting a puzzle together. There's a lot of pieces to put in this puzzle, and a lot of them that you don't even know because they may be flipped over backwards. So you don't know what that piece looks like till you turn it over. Like with especially trauma survivors, you may have been to therapy. You may be in a place to where you're not dealing with the same thing that caused you this anxiety and these thoughts and feelings to begin with. But what if you run into something that reminds you of that one day? You don't even realize it, and all of a sudden you're back feeling a certain way, either anxious or depressed or confused. And oh, wow, how did this happen? It could be a person, it could be a place, it could be a circumstance that just your body remembers those things, even if your conscious mind does not. And that goes to your other point of trauma is stored in the body. It's not just in the mind. So anxiety is the easiest one to think about. When you are in a situation or in a circumstance, you feel that in your body first. You start getting nervous, your heart starts beating faster, and then all of a sudden you're starting to have racing thoughts. It's not like you see something and then think about it. You know what that reminds me of? When I was abused as a child. And so let me bring that memory back up and have a reaction to it. No, your body reacts like that. Your nervous system, because it's stored there. That's where it's stored, is in your nervous system. And so the connection between physical health and mental health is so crucial. And that's actually one of the areas I think we're doing better about now. The more we learn about the nervous system and how it works and how it affects everything in your body, including your mental health, is just so important to learn. And so the more people can do to improve their physical health between exercise, diet, proper rest, doing things that they enjoy, uh, the more you can do of those things, the better you're going to increase your mental health as well, because the two are connected so closely. It's just amazing.
Yeah, I get the impression from you that you take quite a pragmatic approach with sort of running the programs. So in other words, you're protecting yourself to a certain extent by protecting your own emotions a little bit by not getting too involved. But that's not to say that you're not disinterested. You are interested, but it's almost like kind of stepping outside of the actual event being able to see it from a higher point of view, if you like. Would I be right in my assumption?
Yes, actually, absolutely. You have to learn yourself. You have to become a student of yourself. You have to know what's going to work for you and what's not. For me, like I said very early on, professionally, I learned what was not for me. And so I gravitated towards other areas that I could excel in. And I did very well in that. Now, the more I healed and grew over years, now I'm much more equipped to participate in different types of roles. So, as a trauma recovery coach, for instance, I can sit and talk to someone for an hour and their emotions don't bother me. I know how to handle it and I know what that buffer is, where it lies. I also know I can tell in myself if I'm getting too much of something. I can sense it very early and I've learned to do something about it very quickly. Even if it's just adjust my schedule. If I start feeling, oh, wait a minute, I'm having some anxiety from this, or maybe today's just one of those days where, I'm not at a 8 or a 9, I'm kind of at a 5. I Is there anything I can move around just to lighten the load a little bit? And then maybe make plans to take a 30-minute nap this afternoon. Maybe make plans to sit down and watch one of my favorite movies while I eat dinner tonight. Maybe I can call a friend today and say, "Hey, you want to meet for coffee?" So becoming a student of yourself, you're learning what works and what doesn't, and learning how and when to put those pieces in place. And that is mental health. It's not just a cure of all bad things. You know, there's everybody's life, whether you're dealing with trauma, neurodivergent, whether it doesn't matter. Everybody's life, you're going to have sunshine and rain. You're going to have winter. You're going to have spring. You know, after every night, guess what comes next? Day. After every day comes night. That's the same. So when you have these struggles and you're healing and you're growing, that's an area that you can learn to accept, is that this is normal life. Learning to face just daily challenges. But the more you learn yourself, the more you know about yourself, the more you can do that. And it doesn't jump up to a 10 for you emotionally.
I really like that phrase, becoming a student of ourselves. I think it's probably the most profound statement for anybody that's watching and listening this, that's actually working in psychology or as a counselor on one thing or another. All
Mm,
those kind of areas is, I think, is probably the most important part. I remember myself having sort of 20 years ago, I started working with youth in similar situations. So I worked with 17 to 25-year-olds in a hostel.
mm,
And it does burn you out very, very quickly. I can't believe I did about 5 years of that. And then the following 15 years was frontline with the drugs and alcohol field
mm,
until I've now finally taken retirement. But it's incredible what we learn along the way. And I
mm,
think that kind of that self-care part of it is just so important. And I think one of the biggest lessons I'd learned, and I see lots of people, they go into it for the right reasons, but often they think that sort of like helping people was about giving them advice or based on their own experience. Oh, you should do this and should do that. And it's, for me, it's not about that. It's about listening, and it's about
mm.
helping people to find their own answers. Would you agree with that? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. The first part of that statement too, when people are very genuine about wanting to help others. There's very I don't know a number, but I would probably just guess there's probably 1%, half of a percent, that go into helping professions for any other reason. Maybe there's some people out there that think, oh yeah, I'm going to make money off of this or something, but that's a scam. That's different. But most people go in, they generally want to help people. And there is a process to that. There's, like you said, there's a learning curve to that as a profession. Um, and even if you're just volunteering with organizations, people volunteer through like the Red Cross and their church and other social clubs and Special Olympics, organizations like that. Even volunteering, there's there's a learning curve to it, to where it's not about you anymore. It's about that person. And what do we need as people, especially if we're struggling, especially if we're going through a challenge? Most of the time, it's just to be heard and seen. So that giving advice right off the bat is not what they need. It's not what's going to be beneficial to them. It's not really helpful. They get that all the time. Oh, you're an alcoholic. Just quit drinking. Okay, sure. Why haven't I thought of that before? Uh, a little bit of homework, going into something is worth gold. What is it really like to do this as a profession? What are what are substance abuse issues really about? And you'll learn very quickly it's not much about the substance. It's generally about covering up something else, something deeper. It's filling that void. And a lot of the times with just mental health therapy, is the same thing. A lot of people will come in and they're talking about this, this, and this, and most therapists will keep asking and keep asking and keep asking because they know there's something deeper there. And so those listening skills are extremely, extremely important. I know for myself, when I first started an intentional effort of healing and growth and going to therapy and working on myself, the my initial presentation was, well, I have depression. And so therapists, okay, well, let's talk about your depression. What does that mean? What are the symptoms? What have you experienced? Blah, blah, blah. And I would tell them, and not too much longer, it would become, well, why do you think you're depressed? It's obvious that you meet the the criteria for this medical diagnosis, but what else? When's the last time you weren't depressed? And then I start going back, and then we start coming up with, okay, when I was 8 years old, my mother died. 3 months after that, I was sent to live with my father, whom I had never even met or seen. From the point of 9 years old up to 18, 20 years old, he was emotionally and psychologically abusive. So I grew up the, at a crucial point in development and childhood. I lost my safety, I lost my compassion, I lost my home, and was put into a world where I was a stranger, I was unwanted, and I was reminded of those things daily. So no wonder that even if I didn't have, quote, medical clinical depression, major depressive disorder, you want to call it, even without that, there's no wonder that I would have grown up with so much self-doubt, low self-worth and self-esteem, totally dysfunctional in the areas of society and relationships, things like that. So learning to listen is where you're going to get to people's roots, the root causes, and then be able to give them the support they need to work on it themselves.
It's kind of like looking back at the whatever it is that we experience in our lives, or what other people tell us about their lives. It's the deconstruction of it, isn't it? I think of it metaphorically like if the engine, if your car's broken down and there's something wrong with the engine, There's no point in standing around and going, well, why is my car broken down? What am I going to do? It takes a bit of deconstruction to get there. So, in that metaphorical way, I often use this. It's the situation is, well, if my car's broken down and I'm on the side of the road, what do I need to do? Perhaps I need to phone somebody to say I'm going to be late for the meeting I'm going to. Another
Hmm.
part of that might be then calling out recovery truck to come and get the car booked into the garage and find out what's going on. So there's all those little pre elements to
Yep.
solving the problem, but the fundamental problem is there's still a broken car, and that needs deconstructing and diagnosing. And I think it's very much the in a much bigger way about our lives. We can, like
Yes.
as you said earlier, we can poke around the superficial stuff, and perhaps make some little corrections here and there, and a little bit of medication here and a little bit of medication there might help. But it's getting to the root causes, and sometimes, and I also a great believer in the fact that there's a temptation to sometimes to think that actually that in order to solve those problems, that a person needs to go really deep into their history. But in some cases, people are resilient and they manage even carrying that burden.
Hmm.
So I do tend to think that actually it's not either one or the other. It can be elements of all of that or some of it, and whichever makes the right balance is probably going to be the most successful.
Hmm.
What's your thoughts
Yeah.
around that, Jamie?
Healing and growth are always going to be in stages, and they're not always the same for every person. So let's say, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a more basic example, but if you and I both, walked into a doctor's office and said we had the same symptom of something, just because we have the same symptom doesn't mean it's the same cause of that symptom. So we might need very different treatments, whether it be medicine, physical therapy, whatever. Definitely with emotional issues. Um, you may have two people that are both depressed or have depression. They both might not need the same type of work, and or it might not be at the same time. So, um, so for instance, when I first started going to therapy when I was younger, I one of the first people I saw was a male therapist, and I couldn't get out of that office quickly enough because to me that was my father, and I just couldn't handle it. The abuse I had grown up with, I there's no way I was going to be able to discuss my problems openly and to get any kind of healing from that. But years later, after seeing female therapists, whom I thought would would be the key, as I healed and grew, I came to realize it wasn't the fact that it was a male therapist. It was his style. He was very direct. And at the beginning of my healing journey, I needed comfort. I needed that mother that I had lost. I needed someone to listen and be compassionate and be gentle. Now, after after many many years of studying and healing and growth, the last time I talked to a therapist, she was very kind, very sweet, very compassionate, and within 10 minutes I knew this ain't happening. This not working. I need someone direct. I've I've grown out of that stage to now, if I'm talking to someone, just let's cut to it. Boom. So it wasn't the fact that it was just a male therapist at the beginning. It was the approach. And that was, It's almost like you're having to reparent your child self. And this is a very common theme in psychology, is working with the inner child. And so you kind of have to go back and say, okay, what does that child need? And so at the beginning, that's what I needed, was just more comfort and compassion. And I could have found other therapists, male or female, that had that approach, and it would have been fine. But I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know it until after, you know, I went through it for some years. So everybody doesn't need the same thing, and they don't need it at the same time. And we're all going to grow. What you need right now is not what you're going to need in 10 years. You know, like you know this way better than I do, probably, in terms of like addiction. Um, at first, it's a person needs stability. They need stability and they need some support. And then you can kind of start talking about the actual substance itself. You can start talking about underlying issues, root causes, the psychology behind it. It's probably going to be several years before they actually can get to the point of saying, okay, now I'm ready and healed and stable enough to kind of start working on my relationships that I've either lost or destroyed or whatever. You know, you can't just jump right off the bat and say, okay, you're coming in for this problem. Now let's send you to talk to your family that you left, or whatever. That's not happening on day one. So there's stages to these things, and you really just have to, like you said, learn to listen to the person and let them tell you what they need at that moment, and then kind of support them and guide them from there.
That's absolutely right. I think this is one of the things when you were talking about that first therapist that you had. Uh, it's what we refer to as transference, isn't it? It's the
Hmm.
and it's hidden. You obviously weren't aware of it. We're not necessarily aware of it. I've had situations where I've helped people in the I've had a client in the past who said I can't work with you for whatever reason, and it's probably some transference because it's maybe that I remind them of somebody that in their life that caused them trauma. And as
Yep.
you said, and this is really interesting that at that point that person's not healed enough
Hmm.
to be able to manage that, so they need to go somewhere else. And I said that the thing that really uh, I'm really quite passionate about, having now just retired from all of this and looking back on it. There's a great, I think, with the certainly in this country, and I guess it's much the same well throughout. Really, when giving out therapies, they get commissioned. These services get commissioned in many ways, and there's always some kind of target. It's got to be hit. It's an expectation to get people to recover
Hmm.
by a certain point within a certain time. Just doesn't work. It doesn't work like
Hmm.
that, and I think that's where very many cases where it all goes wrong because it's not about selling widgets. The this crisis of which is essentially mental health, isn't it? Really, even if it's with to, to do with to do with substances or not, it's set that the basis
Yep.
of it is to do with mental health, and everybody's different, and it's negotiating that whole way through. As you said right at the beginning, it's like a puzzle, isn't it? It's finding the bits of the puzzle and finding how to put them back together.
Yep. Yeah, it's so interesting that, and I think most um, most people in the psychology field either know or at least learn this, you know, is that it's an application of principles. So, like you said, there, sometimes you have these targets you're trying to hit. Like, okay, well, by, you know, 90 days, we want to hit this level, or we want to be here, or whatever. And it just doesn't work that way. But the principles are the same. Like, automatic right off the bat, that people like suppress memories that are hurtful. All right, that. So 3 months, 6 months, 12 months into working with someone, and all of a sudden something comes up that you haven't even talked about before, that they haven't talked about before, that's not really a big surprise, because we know that's kind of how the mind works, especially when you experience childhood trauma. Your brain is very good at trying to survive. So it kind of cordons off some of those memories sometimes, some of those experiences, and partitions, puts up these walls to try to protect yourself psychologically. And so those principles can be applied, but not in such a way that, like you said, it's a checklist of, okay, we have to be here, we have to be there. Um, I always recommend people, like when they're going to therapy, after about the third session, you should be speaking with your therapist. They should already be speaking to you about it. But if they're not, you bring it up. What's the game plan? You know, where are we going with this? Because after about three or four sessions, maybe, should be enough discovery of talking about the problem to start laying out a plan. And that plan's not going to be the same for everyone. So I when I work with clients in the trauma recovery, you know, one of the first steps might be, okay, let's really dial down on your physical health, because from what you're telling me, you've got these issues, and here's where you're at today. So let's take where we're at today and see what that next step forward is. But for the next person, it might be, I've been to therapy, I've been on medication, I've done the basics, but I'm still having problem with relationships. Okay, so then that's what we're going to work on. But it's different for everybody. And like we said, it could just be a matter of timing in there. So yeah, it all kind of goes back to what you said, at the beginning, is it's learning to listen. It's learning to listen and walk with someone where they're at today and where they're going to for the next step tomorrow.
Yeah, holding people as you go along with them as well, isn't it? Again, so something one of the parts of my job that I most enjoyed was doing the duty desk. So that was like seeing people coming in for the first time. Um, Often people in a very distressed state, physically and mentally, and sometimes it wasn't. Even, it was even it would be relations of people, those sort of problems. And you start off with a blank canvas, it's so important to get that to begin to build that early rapport. Hello, my name's Martin. How can I help you today? And the amount of times I'd see people, I don't know where to start, and and often they break down, and I'd say, okay, well, we'll start with the first thing that comes into your head. Doesn't matter whether it's the beginning, the middle, the end, or something else.
Hmm.
Let's start. Feel free to speak about what you feel that you want to talk about today, and we'll go from there. And then just allow them to lay it all out, and then we can begin. Do you find that then you begin to pick out the little bits of the information that you receive? Well,
Yeah,
what's that about? Okay, you told me about this. You told me about what's that? Tell me a bit more about that. What's that about? If I interpreted that correctly when you said so and so, so and so, so and so, and I find that really fascinating to do that. Is
yeah,
that kind of how you work?
I am always just curious. I want to know, I want to know everything, but you start off with, like you said, where are we at today? Where are you at today? Well, let's start from there and go forward. And I'm always like, okay, well, what else is there? Or how, you know, how do you, what's effective for you? What's going to benefit you? Like, not just today, but, in a year, in 5 years. Um, and I think that's something that's so important for people in the helping profession is to know that healing is possible. Not everybody's going to. A lot of people are going to start because they're in a crisis situation and they're just trying to relieve that immediate pain. And they may quit services just abruptly. You may not ever hear from them again, but you know that it's possible. And so you can encourage people when they're doing the hard work and say, good, what you're doing is good. I'm proud of you. You're you're doing a great job. Keep it up. Yes, this is going to be difficult. You're going to have difficult days, and some of these uh, some of these efforts for growth and healing are going to be hard. It's not easy to go to someone that you hurt 3 years ago, 5 years ago, and say, "Hey, I'm sorry. I I screwed up, and regardless of where we go forward, I just want you to know that I apologize and I see that I hurt you." Um, those things are not. That's not the cherry on the icing. That's not the best thing in life to experience, but it brings accountability. It brings strength. It brings self pride in a good way. You learn that you actually like yourself, that you actually love yourself, because the more you do internally, then the more you can balance externally. And that gives you, your own hope and validation. So yeah, sorry, that learning to provide uh, that support from the very beginning, where they're at and where they need to go, and then learning to provide that validation and just be there often is the key to someone's success.
I was the other thing I was just thinking back to what you were saying again earlier is I'm really interested. I'm curious about the how you're constructing the boundaries around. I guess probably if you're helping other people to be therapists as well, or um, how do you go about constructing that? We were talking about values and so on. There's a specific way that you're doing that because we want to be inclusive, don't we? We don't want to make it too rigid. We want to be able to make something that's going to work for, even if it just works for one individual. That you find the way, and it's not the same. Like you said, it's not the same for everybody else. It's not the same for other clients. How do you
Mm.
construct that framework for therapists to be able to work in that very holistic, open way?
Yeah, so I do take a very practical approach to it, and that doesn't rule out the emotional, because I look at the emotional care as part of the practical care. So for me, it's very holistic. In other words, um, I say, okay, you're going to take care of yourself physically. That needs to include exercise, that needs to include diet, that needs to include sleep. You're going to look at your relationships. You're going to look at your emotions, your own healing and growth. You're going to look at your time. You know, if if you had uh, a pet horse and you were going to use that horse to carry a load to somewhere, we look back at the 1800s and whatnot, where horses, before the invention of cars, people put all these sacks and things on horses, and that's how they would often use to carry things. How much weight would you put on that horse before it's unhealthy? You know, 50 pounds, 100 pounds, 500 pounds, you know, up at a certain point, you're going to recognize, wait a minute, this is too much. So you have to look at your own time management and your own emotional management in the same way. You have to learn to say, okay, if I put more than this, it's going to be too much. And generally, you kind of learn a little bit of a buffer in between what's the breaking limit and what you actually do. Because you also got to consider that, like I said earlier, life just goes on. There's good days and bad days. So even if you plan to your best, something's going to happen. Next week your car's going to break down. Somebody's going to get sick. Whatever. It's going to happen, and you're going to have more on your plate than what you planned. And so looking at each part practically and learning what's healthy and maintaining that. Let that be the norm. So for instance, just exercise doesn't mean you have to go to the gym and lift weights, heavy weights 5 days a week, 6 days a week, and whatever, go on this 2 or 3 hour fitness plan. That's not the norm. However, making sure that you take a walk 3 times a week for at least 30 minutes. That's normal. That's manageable. And that can be such an easy practice that you can put into your routine. And that's going to help regulate your nervous system. That's going to help your immunity, your digestive system. It's going to help your mental health, all of those things just by that one simple practice. Okay. Getting sleep. I can't tell you how many people report that they don't sleep 7 or 8 hours. And studies show time and time again, if you're getting less than that on a regular basis, it is drastically affecting your health, which drastically affects your mental health. You can't think clearly. You can't concentrate. You have emotional dysregulation. Um, so that, and again, there's another one piece that you can look at and say, okay, what do I need to do to make sure that this happens and make that a regular part of your life? And as you work on those things, you'll get to a point that it's balanced and that your nervous system kind of is taken care of so that it can take care of the extra stuff that comes along. So yeah, taking a very holistic and practical approach is, for me, is the best way and matches anybody and everybody wherever they're at today moving forward.
That's fabulous. That sounds excellent. Very, very good advice, I think, for anybody out there that's listening and wants to learn more. I'm always of the view that we never know everything, and part of living, part of existing, is the motivation to find out what's the next thing that's coming along. What's the next improvement to life in general. To where we go. It's interesting. Do you ever find the other thing I was going to say to you is, do you ever get a situation where you get those aha moments with the client? And I know having been a client myself with a particular therapist, when I talked about one particular item, and the aha moment came, and this is about 15 years ago. I'd said to this therapist that there was a particular song video about a guy, I think it's an Australian guy who got a disabled son, and he was known as the Iron Man, and he took. I know you might have seen this. He took his son everywhere. He'd run marathons with him. He'd swim and have in the boat and everything. And it was quite a famous thing. And it used to make me oh, I used to cry my eyes out, and it really used to upset me to watch it, but I couldn't help myself watching it. And I said to I said to this therapist, I don't know why it makes me so emotional. And she said to me, "Do you wish your dad was like that?" It was bang.
Mm,
It was just the most amazing revelation. And that just made so much sense. And it was like, at that point, I then became really emotional because it was all of a sudden there was that answer that solved an awful lot of issues for me at that time. It's
uh-huh.
incredible, isn't it? Something else I ask my guests, okay, and I'm going to ask you, Jamie, what brings you peace?
Oh, what brings me peace is, and this is a small thing, but it has become vitally important in my life. And that is in the morning, I get up, I make a cup of coffee, and I sit by the window and look out. And as I drink my coffee, I'm listening to a meditation. And I do that every morning, unless I'm traveling or something. But that's my normal routine. And it, you know, I started it years ago and it just became that, that moment of peace in my life to where there is nothing else going on. There is nothing external. I can, if it's the sun rising, if there's clouds, if it's rain, whatever, it's just a moment, just a few minutes. It's, we're talking 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes of just peace. And it feels so good. I love it.
Try to do that myself, but I'm not as disciplined at doing it every day. But mindfulness is something that I do practice, and I do like uh, to facilitate for other people as well. So, Jamie, for people listening and watching out there, how do they get in touch with you? How can they, if they want to speak to you or to use some of your services? This is your opportunity to for a bit of self promotion.
Thank you. Yes, my website is managingmentalhealth.net, and you can get in touch with me there. My email's there. If you're interested in trauma recovery coaching, you can reach out to me there and we can set up a free initial consultation. And also my books that I've published uh, that address different areas of mental illness are on there as well. And those are all available in ebook form. So anywhere in the world, you can get a copy.
Wonderful. Well, Jamie, thank you very much for being my guest today. It's been a very interesting conversation, and I'm wishing you well, wishing you peace, continued peace, and perhaps we'll link up again sometime in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
Just stopping the recording. That's it. That's it. So I think that stopped. Yeah, it has stopped now. So, that's just going to continue. It looks like it says 99% uploaded. Oh, hang on. Let's just have a look.
Yep.
Yeah, it's recording quite well
Yep. I see
actually.
that.
It's coming across. Sometimes I've finished with people, and my guest is at like 60%, or I'm at 60%. So we just leave it
Uh-huh.
going. And there was one I regret. I made a mistake a few months ago with the guest. Cut it off too early, and there was um, it just basically corrupted my vocals,
Oh,
my sound. So
huh.
I couldn't use the whole podcast. I managed to use the bits of the advice from the lady who I interviewed, and
Mm.
just use that
Yeah.
into little short content. So that
Now
was
it still says recording on my end. So I don't know if it's the recording stopped on your end or not.
but yeah, no, it is. Yeah, it is still same recording. So I did hit stop. It says issue. Something went wrong. Refresh the page and try again. I think it'll be honest with you, I think it'll be all right. And it'll just mean that when it
Yeah.
cuts off completely, I might need to cut off a load of stuff at the back here because we're on about it's yeah, just say up to
Yeah.
50 minutes.
At least that's easy. That's easy to just
Okay,
take a
no,
clip and
no worries. Yeah, even so, I'm sure there'll be there's plenty of material there to be able to share out, and I'll let you know when it goes out in the next couple of weeks or so, and feel free to
all right.
use it if it's stuff you like and you want to use for a bit of promotion for your own site. Then I encourage you to do so. That way, we get a win-win
Absolutely.
situation.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. I'll definitely
Okay, man.
drive
No
people to the.
worries.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. You have a good day, and we'll
Take care.
hopefully see
All
you
right.
again in this
Well,
future.
let's
All right.
let's end up leaving. Let's end the session. Okay. Take care. Bye for now.
All right. All right. All right. Bye bye.